AM 1420, WBSM presents Spooky South Coast with your hosts, Tim Weisberg and Matt Costa.
Good evening and welcome to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with science advisor Matt Moniz. And surprise, surprise, the opening theme didn't work here on the radio broadcast, but we'll add that into the podcast because that's what we do here. We adapt and overcome. We got to figure out what's going on with this computer. If anybody out there is listening from the station, how come I can't play anything on the internet computer? I'd say send me a text or an email, but
yeah, your phone's dead now too.
2004 cell phone here because something happened with my cell phone over this past week, so we make do with what we have. All right, well, we are here to talk with you about the paranormal, as we are each and every Saturday night. And coming up in a few minutes, we'll be joined by our guest for tonight, John Ronner. His website is angelwatchingme.com. And John Ronner has written a number of books about angels, angel experiences, angel mythology and folklore, actual encounters that people have had with angels. So we're going to talk to him about everything angelic, which is something that is totally foreign to myself and Moniz, because we are no angels.
That's for darn sure.
See, this is one of those shows where if I had access to the computer, or like I was able to plug in my iPod, we'd be, running some Greg Allman as a bumper, and there's plenty of angel bumpers that we could be using, but we'll just do what we can with what we have. Well, we had a great time last week at Oddfest, and if you missed the show last week, you can check out the podcast as well as the video archive on YouTube, both of which are accessible through SpookySouthCoast.com, and you can watch what went on. We had a lot of fun out there, raised a lot of toys, brought in a lot of toys for Tots. So thank you to everybody who came out to Oddfest and donated. And of course, it's not too late. They're taking donations here at the studio for Toys for Tots. So if you want to swing on by WBSM during the week, you can leave your donation here. Also, I do want to mention that our hearts go out to our family and friends and listeners around Newtown, Connecticut, with the horrible tragedy that happened there. And I think this is a good time to have this show about angels because we need a little bit of something positive to get in. So I don't want people to feel like we are overlooking that discussion as well. And it did have kind of an odd connection to the paranormal community as well, because not only is that the school that our friend Jeff Belanger attended when he was in elementary school, but Art Bell lived in that town when he was a child, too, and went to whatever was the precursor of that school, because, Art Bell was probably born in 1845. So, no offense, Art. But so there is a very strong connection to our paranormal community there, and our hearts go out to everyone out there. And I don't want to get too much into it, Moniz, because I know, I know that we'd be stepping on a little bit of a hornet's nest if we start stirring up some of that discussion. So we'll just leave it at that. And you know how if we start discussing it too much, the phone lines are going to light up with people calling in and sharing their own thoughts and beliefs. And then that's not the direction we're going to be going tonight.
Neither the time, the place, nor the show for it.
Yeah, but people, when they want to vent, they need to vent. So you can't really stand in the way of that. And but like I said, I want to keep tonight's discussion about something positive, which will be angels, tonight with our guest, John Ronner. So, but before we get into the discussion, I do want to let everybody know that in case you did miss last week's show, and thanks again to Matt Amaral for holding down the fort back here. He becomes the third Matt now to be involved in the show. But we want to thank him for holding things down here in the studio and helping us get on the air. It worked out actually pretty well. So
it did?
Yeah. So we're hoping that we can do more remote broadcasts in the future. Not too many, because we love being here in the studio, where you can watch us on Spooky TV at SpookySouthCoast.com. You can see what's going on here in the studio. And I know that we have a lot of newcomers who are going to be joining us in the show, in the chat room tonight for the first time. So welcome to all of them. And we will be having our discussion with John in just a few minutes. But we did announce on last week's show that our latest Legend Trips event is on sale. And that will be at the Houghton Mansion in North Adams, Massachusetts, April 5th to the 7th. And you've probably seen the Houghton Mansion on Ghost Adventures, and it's been featured on a number of paranormal documentaries on television.
Ghost Hunters went there.
And a lot of those, like, World's Scariest Places, those type of shows often visit there as well.
Featured in a number of books.
And it's going to be our first ever multiple night event. It's going to start on Friday night. We're going to have a little meet and greet with everybody in the hotel conference room, and we'll have some presentations and things going on then, and then we'll go out and have some drinks together which I'm pretty excited for because we never get that opportunity with our Legend Trippers to actually just let loose. So we will do that. And then we'll have some festivities planned on Saturday during the day before the actual investigation kicks off on Saturday night. And the Houghton Mansion, of course, is just a mile away from the hotel where we're trying to work out a deal with. And then we'll have our normal Legend Trips investigation. And then Sunday morning, everybody can wake up and we'll probably all have some breakfast together before we depart and go our separate ways. So it's our first 3-day event. And I'm very excited for that because, normally these things are so rushed, we barely have time to really interact with our attendees and to have a little bit of fun around the investigations themselves. So this is going to be a unique and fun event. So definitely, if you want to get involved, buy your tickets now through our website, legendtrips.com. The tickets are $149, and we are going to secure that hotel room deal coming up right about now. It's going to be about $110 a night for the hotel room, which is cheaper than their regular rate by far. And we're still working out the details with that. So, but for now, you can purchase your tickets to the event for $149 from legendtrips.com. And PayPal has been gracious enough to start offering us a service called Bill Me Later, where if you pass their credit check, you can actually spread out the payments over the course of multiple months.
Yeah.
So you get 6 months interest free if you want to purchase a ticket now and give it as a Christmas gift either to yourself or to the paranormal fan in your life. Then you don't have to worry about paying for it right away. You can kind of spread those payments out. So, and the Bill Me Later option should be available for all of our events because it's for purchases of $99 or more, which most of our tickets are $99 or more. So there you go. Works out well. So just go to legendtrips.com for more information. All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we will have our guest, John Ronner, as we spend the night talking about angels because we need a little bit of positivity here. And we're getting close to the Christmas holiday, so we'll talk about some Christmas angels as well coming up in just a few minutes here on Spooky Southcoast.
Bad or scary.
So, Jacqueline.
But that's not
I
true.
wanted to talk to you
Wheelchairs
about
are
something.
good.
Oh, wait.
They're like
hold on.
cool
I just gotta
cars that
type.
help these kids get where they need to go, like to school or to the mall or to the park, just about anywhere. So we don't need to be afraid of wheelchairs, but we do need to try and stop diseases that cause muscles to get weaker and weaker. Now, the Muscular Dystrophy Association is working hard to beat these diseases so kids and adults don't have to get any weaker. Call your local MDA office or 1-800-572-1717. That's 1-800-572-1717. Learn how MDA is making progress in the fight against muscular dystrophy.
Just sell batteries. No, we install them fast and free with purchase on most vehicles. We install rain or shine or even that weird thing where there are some clouds, the sun is shining, but you're still getting rained on? Yeah, we'll still install it. Free battery installation, even in weird weather. Only at Advance Auto Parts. Service is our best part. Advance Auto Parts. See store for details.
Thanks for asking, but I'd rather not send you nude pictures. I'm camera shy. I already said no. Under my clothes, I'm a robot. My webcam is broken. I'm worried they'll get passed around school. I have a rash. I have nudophobia. I have lizard skin. I'm a vampire, so I don't show up in pictures anyways. Your badgering has really killed the mood.
When someone is pressuring you to do something you don't want to, how many ways can you say no before they get the message? Let us know at that'snotcool.com. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Hello.
Hey man, you up?
No.
Wake up, I need to talk to you. I think your house is haunted.
Hey, come on, it's 2:30 in the morning.
I can't sleep in here, man. I'm scared.
All right, welcome back to Spooky Southcoast. Tim Weisberg along with science advisor Matt Moniz, and joining us on the line now is our guest, John Ronner. He's worked as a newspaper reporter during the 1970s and 1980s, winning awards from the Associated Press and other news organizations. Since the mid-1980s, Ronner has spoken with hundreds of people about their experiences with angels. He has discussed his findings in interviews with the Wall Street Journal, Publishers Weekly, and other publications, and in appearances on such national programs as The Phil Donahue Show, The Learning Channel, Sightings, and the NBC special Angels 2. He's written books such as Do You Have a Guardian Angel?, Know Your Angels, The Angel Almanac, and The Angels of Cokeville and Other True Stories of Heavenly Intervention. And he joins us now on the program. Good evening. Here we go. Let's turn him up here.
Good evening.
How you doing, John?
Oh, doing fine.
Oh, we are so honored to have you on the show, especially this close to the Christmas holiday. I'm sure that angels are on the forefront of many people's minds this time of year.
Good to be with you, and I think that goes without saying. Yes, I'm looking forward to the program.
Now, how is it that somebody who is a newspaper writer such as yourself, I mean, I'm a journalist myself, but I know that I'm a little bit paranormally bent. I've always been that way, and it just so happened that I was a newspaper writer who had an interest in the paranormal. But how does somebody who starts off as a newspaper reporter become so interested in the topic of angels?
Well, like a lot of people in journalism, I had a big interest in reading in general, and paranormal in particular, among other subjects. In the 1960s, I read a book, The Other Side, which was written by an Anglican archbishop about the death of his son, his attempt to recontact his son through spiritual mediums and so on. I didn't go that deep into it, but it was just a subject of interest to me, among others. When in the early 1970s, when Raymond Moody came out with his book on near-death experiences that caused a sensation around the country, like everybody else, I was asking myself, well, what is this? And I was, I guess, as a young man at that time in my 20s, I was struck by the circumstantial evidence for the existence of a spiritual world. It was the first time that I had seen. That I'd come across information that impressed me. I guess I would say I was impressed by the fact that here you had a diverse group of people who were having essentially the same experience, despite different cultural expectations. At a time when the near-death experience had not had any publicity, nobody really knew much about the phenomenon, although it had been around, of course, as long as human beings have been. This leaving the body, journeying into the world of light, experiencing a life review, and so on. And at that point, I'd say a few years later, I came across Billy Graham's book on the subject of angels, and although I thought Graham had done a good job from his perspective, it was more an attempt to try to evangelize, and I was more interested in the general information. And so I got to thinking at that time, what would it be like? What would it be like if somebody actually took Moody's approach to the subject of angels, actually did a journalistic investigation of the subject, just gathering information together, not really attempting to take sides or convert or attempt to favor one group over another? And what would that be like? And so I began, I guess, the hobby of just collecting information. And it went on for a few years, and then finally in the early 1980s, I decided to get to take it to a serious level, and I spent the next 14 months researching systematically and ended up with 140 file folders full of notes, crammed with information, full of notes. And Do You Have a Guardian Angel came out in 1985, and really at that point, that was the first of a series of books, and it took the country really by storm. I was really surprised at the reaction. A lot of people, particularly the younger listeners, may not realize how skeptical an age we were living in back in the 50s, 60s, and the 70s. All of that's pretty much turned around now, and I'd say public opinion today is far, far more liberal and accepting toward paranormal phenomena than it was when I was a young man. But one of the things that really surprised me most of all about the reaction to the first book was that so many of the people reading it were claiming to have had experiences of their own. There were no polls in those days. Nobody realized how widespread the phenomenon was. And in fact, at the height of the angel wave in the early 90s, we realized that 69% of the American public were telling Time magazine in a poll that they believed in angels. 46% felt they had a personal spiritual guardian, and 30% said they were having interactions with that guardian. that's my story.
Well, but you did mention that the Billy Graham book evangelized angels, and
Yes.
and that's the problem with angel reports, is that so often they do have that religious bent to them.
Exactly.
And that's why I think your work is fascinating to somebody like me, because I'm not a religious person, and I want to know what these creatures, beings, entities, whatever you want to call them, may be outside of the religious dogma that's attached to them. But so when you're talking about angel experiences, I mean, how would you define an angel?
Okay, well, a lot of it depends. The term guardian angel is very loosely used by people. It can mean, when that comes out of somebody's mouth, before you have a chance to talk to them, you really at that point have no idea what they're talking about. Now, strictly speaking, an angel would be a superior spiritual being, a non-human entity created separately from humanity. At least that was the opinion of the medieval philosophers, and we, for want of a better standard, we could use that as our official definition. But honestly, the term angel can mean whatever the speaker wants it to mean. For example, there's an entire class of people who feel that their guardian angel is actually a departed loved one that continues to look after them. In most cases, you'll have contact around the time of death, suddenly separated, and a lot of times there might be a crisis apparition where the dead loved one appears, sometimes from miles away, to the survivor to maybe say a final goodbye, to assure the one left behind that the departing one is not in pain, and a few standard things usually happen, and that's about the end of it. But in a minority of cases, a relationship begins, and that relationship might last and linger for years, maybe a lifetime. I spoke to a woman who felt that her late husband continued to make repairs around her house in the same way he made them when he was alive, and that she had various other adventures with it. So that's another popular designation there about, when people say angels, sometimes they have that in mind, and sometimes it could be even less concrete than that. Angelic experiences can just run the gamut. You could be a person might experience an angel as a being of light, like in the near-death experience, or not necessarily in an NDE. Just seeing an angel in his native glory as a superior spiritual being. They might hear a voice, a supernatural voice, warning them, guiding them, comforting them, etc. They may experience an overpowering hunch that compels them to do something that seems completely illogical at the time. I spoke with a woman who was in a store of some sort, and she as she was walking out with a huge amount of cash, for her at least, it was $2,000, and it pretty much represented all she had. She had an overpowering feeling not to continue toward the exit, but to just go into a restroom and stay in there. And she did for some minutes, and then finally came out, and it turned out a robbery had occurred. Somebody had burst into the entrance just as she had moved into the restroom. And her feeling was that if she confronted the robber, there was a good likelihood he would have taken all the money. So it goes on like that. And probably the way we're all touched the most, I would say, by angels would be meaningful coincidence. I have them all the time, and these are the skeptics would write these things off as just statistical coincidences, but some of these coincidences are so uncanny that we're kind of left attributing them to other factors, maybe to angels behind the scenes, maybe to the collective unconsciousness, as Jung put it, the idea that all minds at a certain level are joined. Different explanations.
So then it's possible that people who pass on in the afterlife can become angelic beings, and that there might also be angelic beings that exist outside of being deceased people as well.
Yes, I mean angels, quote unquote. Actually, the proper, probably if there is a proper term, in the field of angelology, it's really one opinion versus another. Mm-hmm. But I would say that I guess the term that I would use to describe a dead loved one would be a guardian spirit acting like a guardian angel. But okay. There would be plenty of instances where people feel that the classic angel is watching over them, a guardian angel. But those are the two major categories. And then, as I said, there's a lot of other ways people feel they're touched by the other side.
I mean, I've often felt myself personally that the idea of angels and what we perceive them in our modern times have kind of been shaped by originally going back to, say, the Renaissance artwork. And,
it has.
And
yes.
then now to the movie representations of angels. I mean, is that a fair assumption that, we've kind of taken something that might have been, biblical at the beginning and kind of shaped it into what we think that it is through our modern lens?
Absolutely. It's a feedback loop. It feeds on itself. We influence it. It influences us. Take the idea of angels with wings. If you go back to ancient times, the earliest Judeo-Christian depictions of angels were wingless. Artists gradually began putting wings on angels in their work to symbolize the rapid flight of a spiritual being. Because while we're having this interview, in our imaginations, we can go from you can go from your studio, and I can go from my home office where I am right now, from there to the edge of the universe, and we can do it instantaneously, because consciousness is not limited in speed or scope when it comes to travel. So those wings were representations, symbols on the part of artists to depict how fast a spiritual being can move. And the halos were representations of the angel's spiritual body of light, the aura around an angel. Of course, when spiritual beings appear, including angels, they can take different forms. You might see a column of light. You might see balls of light. You might see a silhouetted figure surrounded by a bright shine, and on it goes. But the halo, which you see painted around the heads of saints and angels, represents the idea that to a clairvoyant person, the spiritual body appears brighter and larger, particularly around the head, which is one reason you have the little stylized ring above the angels in medieval art and Renaissance art, as you pointed out, and in Byzantine art, of course, where they don't allow three-dimensional representations. You have the two-dimensional golden disc behind the saint's head.
Well, I don't claim to be a biblical scholar in any regard, but from what I understand, those early accounts of angels, they weren't always, so to speak, angels. I mean, from what I understand, they weren't always benevolent beings.
Right. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, you've got, it's kind of, to go all the way back to ancient Judaism, some Bible scholars, I'd say many, possibly the majority, would say that in the early books of the New Testament, there's not really a conception of a personal devil, not yet. You have a cryptic reference in a line in the book of Genesis where it says that the sons of heaven saw the daughters of men and came down to earth, and that's about it. There's no elaboration, but that spawned an entire mythology in ancient times about angels falling from heaven, not initially because of arrogance. Lucifer wasn't in the picture at this point, but they fell because of lust. It was the beautiful mortal women, excited their ardor, I guess you might say, and some of the heavenly hosts came down. Of course, they were punished in ancient Judaism by Yahweh in many different stories. Later on, even as late as the book of Job, which is a much later book in the Old Testament, you still did not have the concept yet of a personal devil, because Ha-Shatan, I guess you could say the adversary in the book of Job, is actually taking orders from the Lord. The book opens with, or early in the book, you have a discussion between God and Ha-Shatan about Job and testing his faith and all that, and it's clear that this actor is a courtier and takes orders from God. It's not a rebel angel that's leading an insurrection, and of course that angel then afflicts Job with many adversities, which he weathers. Later on, though, during the Babylonian captivity, when the Jews were taken, when Jewish nobles were taken prisoner by by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar and brought to Babylon as hostages to prevent uprisings against his empire. And then Nebuchadnezzar, in turn, was conquered by the Persian Empire, and eventually the Jews were liberated. During that time, the Jewish nobles who were hostages came under the influence of Persians and their world religion, which was Zoroastrianism. Only a few, well, maybe a couple of 100,000 Zoroastrians are still left in the world, mostly in India, a few in Iran. But they had a completely different way of looking at things. In Zoroastrianism, you had this spiritual warfare going on between what you might call modern devils and modern angels, and a personal devil, Ahriman, who led the dark angels in continuous spiritual warfare against the angels of light that were led by the good god of light, Ahura Mazda. Well, the Judaism came under this influence and began to change and shift itself, and eventually the increasing belief took root in a personal devil in Judaism, and spiritual warfare became a concept for the first time. Then when Christianity came along a few centuries later, about 500 years later, we inherited this outlook, and this is the genesis of the concept of spiritual warfare and a personal devil. Now, it is worth pointing that in the mystical or metaphysical view, the idea of a personal devil and that sort of conflict has not been as popular. In the metaphysical version of reality, evil is seen as is seen more like the shadow. It appears to have substance. It represents light that's blocked, say by your hand or by your body, but really it doesn't exist. It's just the absence of something else. It doesn't have an existence in its own right. For example, hate would be the absence of love. Fear would be the absence of courage. Ignorance would be the absence of knowledge. So in metaphysical thinking, evil is mostly seen as ignorance. Well, that's how it evolved.
Well, I've often heard stories, too, of even today, some of these, and you get a lot more reports of angels than we do, of course. We've probably gotten 2 or 3 over the 7 years now that we've been doing the show, but even today, they don't seem to be coming down with light and love all the time. I mean, sometimes they do still have that lust for the human condition.
Well, yes, let's get back to that. That was the main thrust of your question. Yeah, you were talking about the fallen angels. Of course, Lucifer came along and fell because of arrogance. So to bring it up to modern times, what is this possibility here that with, I guess one of the main criticisms of the near-death experience over the years was it was all sweetness and light, all fuzzy. But the critics were asking early on, well, what about the unpleasantness? What about the dark side of the Force, so to speak, as they might put it in Star Wars? And indeed, many people who have near-death experiences have reported encountering occasionally malignant beings. For example, we're all familiar by now with the stages of the near-death experience. The first stage is the out-of-body step, and that was the part that impressed me evidentially as giving tantalizing circumstantial evidence for the existence of a spiritual world. The second stage, though, is the journey through the tunnel, through the darkness, moving toward the light, and it's there that many near-death experiences say that they sometimes glimpse or see spirits that appear to be earthbound, trapped. They can't ascend, they can't rise. It's a kind of a spiritualist theory there. They're held down by, perhaps vices or temporary insanity caused by violent death and so on. Some of this crops up in your work. And then they eventually emerge into the world of light, where they confront departed loved ones and also these beings, angel-like beings of light. The question then arises: well, what about demonic forces? And I would say that I noticed that in the material world, as evolution progresses, more light comes into the universe, and also more darkness along with it. There's a balancing that takes place. The shadows do appear to be receding, but intensifying. More light is coming into the world and casting smaller and the shadows are becoming smaller, but they're becoming deeper and darker. So, but the balance continues as we progress. It seems logical to me that there would be malevolent beings out there if there are benevolent ones to balance them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would almost have to be by default. But like you said, too, I mean, it could also be created from that void. I mean, we need to have a dichotomy.
Yes.
That's the way that our mind works, and that's the way that our souls seem to work. We want to have that balance. And I've often...
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I've often thought that, if we could separate ourselves from that, we would have less compulsion toward evil.
That's right. Yes. Sometimes the compartmentalization of society actually almost promotes it. A better balance does tend to keep you does tend to what am I trying to say? Level things out, of course.
Well, we are coming up on the news break, but in the second hour, I'd like to invite some people to call in and hopefully share with you some of their own angelic experiences. And, of course, the numbers are 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. You can email us, spookykrew@spookysouthcoast.com, or you can jump into the chat room on Spooky TV at spookysouthcoast.com. And some of the topics I want to cover coming up in the second hour, John, is I want to discuss the idea of I think that a lot of times people might have angelic experiences, and especially those of us in the paranormal field, and we might confuse them with ghostly encounters. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the differences between those, and I especially want to talk about some of these Christmas-related angel experiences, because it seems like if ever there was a time when we need to have a little belief in miracles, it's close to this holiday, and especially with the tragedy that happened yesterday. So we'll talk about all that coming up in the second hour following the news. In the meantime, if you want to check out John's website, it's angelwatchingme.com. It's also linked up right on the front page of SpookySouthCoast.com as well. And you can check out his books, Do You Have a Guardian Angel? And Other Questions Answered About Angels, Know Your Angels, The Angel Almanac, and The Angels of Cokeville and Other True Stories of Heavenly Intervention. And I noticed, John, that you do have like a 3-pack download available for people as well.
That's right. If they go to Amazon, they can download a digitized version of 3 of the books merged into one file. And for those listeners out there who have Kindle, and of course it's easy to download, or it can be done in a matter of seconds. They can access all 3 books at once, and I think that's over 500 pages full of information, and each page is crammed with concise writing. I mean, there's no padding. And
it's a great deal too. I think I saw it's only $2.99.
I think so. Yes, that's right.
So you can't beat that, and it's a great gift to share with people because it's so easy to share Kindle books and give people Amazon credit to download. So it's a good holiday gift for people, especially those of you out there who need a little positivity, need a little light heading into the holidays, because it is a time when a lot of people have some depression and some issues, including our friend Brian Harnwell, who thankfully was safe this week, and we wish him the best in his recovery. And again, we are coming up on the news. When we come back on the other side, we will talk more with John Ronner about angels. We'll also take your calls and questions, 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. And before we go into the news, we have to say thank you to our number one listener, Chris, for dropping off our Festivus gifts. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we will be enjoying some of those during the break, I'm sure, and having UFO battles as well here in the Spooky Studio. So stay tuned. We'll be right back coming up after the news with more here on Spooky South Coast.
The station the South Coast turns to for local news, talk, weather, and sports. WBSM New Bedford, AM 1420, WBSM.
ABC News, I'm Chuck Severson.
Newtown has suffered a horrendous tragedy, a harm that has broken our hearts.
First Selectman Patricia Lodra of Newtown, Connecticut, where President Obama is to visit tomorrow to meet with the families of the elementary school massacre and to thank first responders. Chief Connecticut Medical Examiner Dr. Wayne Carver says the victims were shot primarily with an assault rifle up close.
I believe everybody was hit more than once.
Some up to 11 times, says Carver.
I don't have detailed information on all of them, but this is a very devastating set of injuries.
ABC's Dan Harris in Newtown.
Police told us the entire disaster was over within, quote, mere minutes. So little time and incalculable damage.
Police here are investigating whether Adam Lanza had an altercation at Sandy Hook Elementary School in the days leading to the shooting. It may help determine why Lanza targeted that school after he killed his mother at home. Nancy Lanza had several firearms registered in her name. A relative tells us she grew up in a rural part of New Hampshire and was very comfortable with guns. Police are now trying to account for all of them.
ABC's Aaron Katursky in Newtown. Police say nobody was hurt in a shooting at the Fashion Island Mall a few hours ago in Newport Beach, California. Police have made an arrest. Word now that yesterday, the day of the school shooting, people waited in line for 2 hours at a gun buyback program in Camden, New Jersey. Gun owners received between $50 and $250, depending on whether it was a broken handgun or a working assault rifle. Firearms. Camden Police Chief Scott Thomas.
These guns are coming from people's homes, which many times end up as items of burglary and end up on our streets and end up into the wrong hands.
Hillary Clinton's spokesman says the Secretary of State developed a stomach virus leading to extreme dehydration, leading to her fainting, hitting her head, getting a concussion. She's working from home. Sources tell ABC News that President Obama has picked Senator John Kerry, Massachusetts Democrat, to succeed Clinton. You're listening to ABC News.
The Business Software Alliance wants you to know that if you work for a company that copies software illegally, you're working for a company.
Hey, speak up. I can't hear you. Everyone knows that copying software illegally is breaking the law and creates unfair advantage. No need to whisper. If you see this happening where you work, report it confidentially to the BSA. Just visit nopiracy.org. In addition to doing what's right, report software piracy, and you may also be eligible for a cash reward. That's nopiracy.org.
Introducing a faster way to push-to-talk. AT&T Enhanced Push-to-Talk. AT&T delivers more of what your business needs. Instant communication, up to 1,000 contacts, plus a broad array of devices and platforms. Visit att.com/enhancedptt3 to get your business started with a free Samsung Rugby Pro. You push-to-talk, we pushed it further. AT&T, rethink possible.
Limited time offer. Free phone on new activations only. Requires 2-year commitment to eligible voice and data plans plus activation of AT&T Enhanced Push-to-Talk service.
How's Nelson Mandela doing after a week in a South African hospital? An update from ABC's Bazi Kanani in Johannesburg.
Former South African President Nelson Mandela underwent surgery this morning to remove gallstones after doctors first treated him for a recurring lung infection. Government officials say the endoscopic surgery was successful and that the 94-year-old Nobel laureate is recovering at an undisclosed hospital in the capital city of Pretoria. Mandela has been hospitalized for more than a week now, his longest hospital stay in more than 2 decades. There's no word yet on when he might return home. Bazi Kanani, ABC News, Johannesburg, South Africa.
A Houston hospital says doctors expect 88-year-old former President George H.W. Bush to be able to celebrate Christmas at home with his family, but no discharge date has been set. Mr. Bush has been treated for a bronchitis-related cough since November 23rd. Who's raising fees?
Southwest Airlines, we love bags.
Southwest Airlines has built its reputation on no fees.
Free, 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 free.
And while it still won't charge for checking 2 bags, it is now increasing the charge for a 3rd bag to $75. Plus, to use the airline's early bird check-in option, where they check in automatically for you, that will now be more expensive. And if you book a flight on Southwest and fail to show up, you'll now have to pay a fee. The airline says the extra fees will increase revenue by $300 million a year. Alex Stone, ABC News.
Says ABC News.
Do you have unfiled tax returns or owe the IRS or state more than $10,000? If you don't take action now, your tax problem is only going to get worse. Seizure of property, bank levies, wage garnishments, and potential criminal prosecution. Call the experts at U.S. Tax Shield for help at 1-800-334-5070. Our tax advisors will review your case for free, inform you of your rights, and give you a guaranteed quote. And we have an A+ rating with the BBB, so get protected. Call U.S. Tax Shield now at 1-800-334-5070.
Chuck Severson, ABC News.
This is Jack Peterson with the latest featured animals up for adoption at the Forever Paws Animal Shelter, 300 Linwood Street in Fall River. There's some great cats up for adoption. Portia is a handsome black and white 3-year-old male. He's very friendly, affectionate, playful, and gets along well with other cats. Oreo is a 10-month-old black and white male who was recently surrendered to the shelter by his previous owner. He has a fun-loving personality and enjoys being held. The shelter is currently having a Black Friday adoption special on all black and tuxedo adult cats. There's a large selection of cats with all different types of personalities that are available through this special. The original adoption fee of $100 has been reduced to $50. Portia and Oreo are available for adoption through this special offer, which will end soon. For more information, call the shelter at 508-677-9154 or visit their website, foreverpaws.com.
Green light. Hey girl, school zone. I'm getting hungry. Car changing lanes. You want to meet me for pizza? Stop sign. Intersection clear. Yeah, street. Pizza sounds good. Ballin Street? Girlin Street!
It's hard to concentrate on two things at once, like texting and driving. Stop the text, stop the wrecks. How will you stop texting and driving? Tell us at stoptextstopwrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
At Advance Auto Parts, we don't do anything just part way. We go full throttle. We don't just sell batteries, no. We install them fast and free with purchase on most vehicles. We install rain or shine or even that weird thing where there are some clouds, the sun is shining, but you're still getting rained on? Yeah, we'll still install them. Free battery installation, even in weird weather. Only at Advance Auto Parts. Service is our best part. Advance Auto Parts. See store for details.
Welcome to spooky Southcoast.
Look, I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
AM 1420, WBSM presents Spooky South Coast with your hosts, Tim Weisberg and Matt Costa.
Check it out, Moniz. I figured it out.
Good job. I knew you could.
It's just so much going on in here that I have trouble sometimes.
We do need Costa back. I mean, you've done a great job in his absence, but I think you've learned most of the stuff that he does pretty well.
I've tried. I mean, I probably could spend a little bit more time thinking things out instead of just coming in here at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night and being like, oh, crap, what do I do now? But so far, so good. I'm really dreading. I mean, I'm hoping that I get the opportunity to do some holiday fill-in shifts here, but, you know, my limited availability. But I'm really nervous about having that chance because I know I'll mess something up. It's different when you come in on a Saturday night and you have no commercials to worry about playing and there are no hard breaks except for the news. But, hey, we figure it out. So if anybody wants to get us a Christmas gift, we're looking for a producer. Actually, we want our old producer back. So
yeah, talk to his boss.
Yeah. Well, we will try and do our best to get Matt Costa back here, at least even for a visit would be nice. But I did talk to him this week via text message, so he's doing well.
Him and I talk all the time on Facebook and stuff. So.
Sends his love to the Spooky South Coast family. So all of you from the Silent Assassin, he says.
Words of wisdom.
Because that's what Matt Costa says. All right, let's get right back into our discussion with our guest tonight, John Ronner. His website is angelwatchingme.com. It's linked up on the front page of SpookySouthCoast.com as well if you want to check out his website during the course of the show. And as we mentioned before the end of the first hour, that if you want to purchase his books, do you have a guardian angel and other questions answered about angels? Know Your Angels, the Angel Almanac, and the Angels of Cokeville and Other True Stories of Heavenly Intervention. You can get all three in one download for your Kindle for $2.99. So, maybe you're giving somebody a Kindle for Christmas. You know, the Kindle Fire HD is one of the hot gifts for this Christmas season. And if you want to share that gift with somebody, then why not include that book with it? Download it for them beforehand. So I actually think John's calling in.
I was going to say they can go to our website and order it through Amazon through our website for them and have it shipped to them for Christmas.
That's a great way to do it. So let's go back into our discussion with John. I believe he called in on line 1 here. Hi, John.
Hey there.
Hi, sorry about that. Must have been disconnected during the news break. We step away from the console, so.
I think I might have been accidentally disconnected, but all's well that ends well.
Well, we have cookies in the studio that one of our listeners sent in to us for Festivus. So we, as soon as we went to the news break, we're like, cookies. So that's how it works here.
Priorities.
Absolutely.
What I was thinking, yes.
So I had mentioned before the beginning, before the news break, the idea that with today's focus on ghosts, especially to our audience and to the paranormal community, there's so much emphasis on ghostly encounters that people may be having angelic experiences and not even realizing it because, our perception has changed about ghostly encounters that now it's become so commonplace that we're like, oh yeah, that just happened, must be a ghost. And we don't consider the possibility that we could be being visited or not to sound corny, touched by an angel.
So that's a good observation, and it kind of begs the question: what would be the difference between a classic angel and a ghost? Well, we touched on that at the beginning of the program. Classic angel would be a superior spiritual being that would stand above us on the evolutionary scale, the same way that we stand above the lower forms of life. So, a ghost, on the other hand, would just be an ordinary human being that made the transition to the other side and essentially remains the same person that he or she was before they passed on. And therefore, it wouldn't be too hard to distinguish a classic angel from a classic ghost. An angel would have an enormous spiritual and intellectual power. That would be overwhelming and would be completely missing in a ghost. Encountering a ghost might be an unusual and sometimes even hair-raising experience or a goosebump-inducing experience, but you would not be left with the undeniable impression that you were in the presence of something vastly superior to yourself. So, and that would be the difference.
So then that's the hallmark of an angelic encounter, is that it's going to happen with such a profound force behind it that you can't know that it's anything else. But it's not going to be anything subtle with an angel.
Oh, there'd be no doubt, and this is one reason that near-death experiencers who encounter the classic being of light, and we're all still trying to categorize what that being of light is, but many people, including myself, note that the descriptions of the being of light are remarkably similar to what you would expect out of a classic angel. But when they encounter the being of light, they refer to it sometimes as an angel, sometimes as God, sometimes as Jesus or some other religious figure. They automatically assume that this is some sort of extraordinary divine being that they run into.
Well, in the first hour, we had discussed a lot of the Judeo-Christian perception of angels, but it's important to note that angelic figures do exist in other religions, right?
As a matter of fact, they do. I mean, the idea of spiritual guardianship is really universal, and not only does it extend to all cultures, but it really extends to all times in human history. I mean, you can go all the way back to the dawn of human civilization around the river valleys, where the soil was fertile and human populations began to grow because agriculture began and enabled and supported those populations. In Sumer, for example, which was the first great civilization in the Mesopotamian Valley, where Iraq and Kuwait are today, archaeologists have dug up small altars or devotional places in the homes where the early Sumerians honored their departed loved ones, their family members. You saw a little hint of it. Those of you who remember the movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe, when he was having a terrible time of it because of the evil emperor and found himself imprisoned, he took, as I recall, there was a scene in which he took comfort by looking at some of the small tokens that represented departed family members. But anyway, there's a lot of you can go all the way back through history and see that Romans had a habit of setting a place at the dinner table for guardian spirits called lares, which were the spirits of the ancestors of the family that were considered to watch over the home. And so it can take that form. Also in other cultures, for example, sometimes in Greek mythology, for example, or the ancient Greek religion, there were numerous thousands, millions of little godlings. They were not quite full-fledged divine beings, but the godlings acted a lot like guardian spirits, you might say. Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher, felt he had one of these godlings who were called daimons in ancient Greek. And one time Socrates was about to turn a corner with his friends, and he hesitated. They asked him why, and he said, "Well, my daimon just warned me against going around that corner." Well, they laughed at him, went around the corner, and were immediately knocked down and jostled about by a group of muddy pigs that were running through the streets. It is interesting to note that the ancient Greek word daimon has come down to us in modern times as demon, but it just changed the meaning. It was not considered demonic by the ancient Greeks at all. It wasn't particularly considered angelic. It was just a godling that attached itself to you. And if a person chose the right path, the daimon would benefit him and give him even better advice. And if he chose the wrong path, the daimon would begin to punish him. That was the way they looked at it. And further east, for example, in Buddhism, you have the concept of the bodhisattva, which is roughly angel-like. The bodhisattvas are mortals who have become so virtuous that they've broken the wheel of karma. They don't need to reincarnate anymore to learn any more spiritual lessons. They've learned everything they need, and they can move on to higher planes of existence. But they voluntarily choose to remain behind in the physical plane, or even to reincarnate in one or more of the Buddhist hells. They have multiple in some of the sects of Buddhism, in order to try to enlighten and help more benighted souls to continue to rise and evolve. So it's all when you get outside the Judeo-Christian tradition, the angel doesn't quite look like what we have in our conception, but you still have divine beings acting as guardians.
And do these other cultures, these other religions, do they have the same approach as, say, the Christian approach, where there's the hierarchy with the archangels and the angels and the Nephilim and all these different types of angelic beings, or are they? Is it more? Is it not as structured as it is especially in Catholicism?
Well, you do have a structure of sorts. For example, in polytheistic religions like Hinduism, you might have, or the ancient Greek religion, you have gods and godlings, where the gods would correspond to the higher angels in the Judeo-Christian hierarchy, and the godlings would correspond to the guardian angels, the individual guardians that get involved in just day-to-day mundane matters. In the Judeo-Christian hierarchy, for example, you have the most popular way of ranking angels, and it's just one of hundreds of different competing opinions about how angels might be organized. That would be the Dionysian system. It was named after a medieval writer who called himself Dionysius. He took the name of a very famous character in the book of Acts that Paul encountered when he was on his missionary journeys through the Roman Empire, founding churches. And because of that byline, you might say, on the product, it gained a lot of currency, got extremely popular, and had authority that it really didn't deserve to have, because later medieval scholars proved that it was a forgery, which was common in ancient times. If you'd write a book or write a treatise or a manuscript or something, you would just put some famous person's name on top of it as the byline. It's kind of hard to describe to a modern audience. It sounds like deception and plagiarism, but I guess the ancients thought of it as honoring an individual because you'd written something that you believe reflected their philosophy. But anyway, bottom line was that was proven to be a forgery. But by that time, Dionysius' system of ranking angels was so popular that it just kind of hung on and continues to this very day as the most popular system for ranking angels. In that organizational scheme, you have 9 ranks of angels, and at the top of the heap are the seraphim, the cherubim, and the 3 top rank angels govern they stay within God's inner court, contemplating the divine presence, and the middle 3 ranks, they get involved in keeping the machinery of the universe working, And then the lowest three ranks, the principalities, the archangels, and the guardian angels, they get involved in the mundane day-to-day activities. And the guardian angel, ironically, which is most important to the individual, is actually the weakest and the lowest man on the totem pole in the Dionysian system. There's a little confusion, too, by the way, because before Dionysius' system became popular in the Middle Ages, there was an ancient system in which, and a simpler one, in which some angels, the most important angels, were called archangels, and everybody else was just an angel. And that this is why we refer today to some of the most powerful named angels in the Bible, Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael, as archangels, even though in the Dionysian system, the archangels were the second lowest and the second weakest in the hierarchy. So one angel writer said, calling Michael and Gabriel and Raphael archangels, isn't that a little bit like calling them corporals in the army when they should be generals? And he made a point, but the explanation for that contradiction is the fact that that's a remnant of the older system of ranking angels before Dionysius became popular. Now the question arises, well, what about Dionysius' system? How valid is it? I personally just consider it another opinion among hundreds out there. I do think that there is a hierarchy of consciousness in the universe. That would be logical. That if you look at the physical world, the material world all around us, you see a vast chain of beings in which each step on the evolutionary scale leads to more complexity, a greater sophistication, a greater ability to deal with the environment, and more intelligence, and a higher consciousness, and including a higher spiritual knowledge, all the way from the smallest subatomic particles all the way up to human beings. It seems that, to me, that this evolutionary trend would continue. It's difficult for me to believe that we are the most complicated and sophisticated creatures in the universe. So, in the unseen realm above us, you would expect that there would be gradations of complexity and ability as you move higher.
Well, like I said at the beginning of the program, we've been doing this show we'll be celebrating our 7th anniversary next month.
Yeah.
And we have every episode that we've ever done available as a podcast. And in that first year, I think it was within the first 6 months of the start of the show, we did an episode that we called our Angels and Demons special, where we had our demonologist friend Keith Johnson came on, and he came on with the angelologist from TAPS, the Ghost Hunters from television. And we had a little bit of a debate and a discussion about the similarities and the differences between angels and demons. And it's still one of our most downloaded podcasts 7 years later.
Yeah.
So it just shows that this is something that is constantly in the forefront of people's minds. It is there seems to definitely be a more of a focus on angels this last decade or so. Do you think a lot of that is part of a post-September 11th spiritual awakening, or do you think that it's kind of a cyclical thing?
Well, there is a bit of a cyclical nature to it, but I attribute it to the general rise in consciousness from generation to generation. There's a lot of light coming into the world now, and more open-mindedness and free thinking than I saw. Less. Society was to such a large extent straitjacketed when I was a young man, into accepted ways of thinking and behaving, and we're beginning to move more and more out of that. I do believe that, of course, that there's always been a vast underground of interest and belief in paranormal, supernatural phenomena. Well, you had the spiritualism movement of the 19th century, which was an outgrowth of Emanuel Swedenborg's spiritual adventures in the 18th century. And so it's never been completely extinguished. But things were pretty bad up until recent decades. Around the turn of the century, the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, well, actually in the late 1800s, you had the Society for Psychical Research that was founded by a group of Victorian, mostly liberal arts scholars, You might ask yourself, well, why weren't there any scientists involved in that? Well, because in the late 1880s and 90s, any scientists that got involved in the SPR would have destroyed their careers instantly. But there's a greater acceptance of spiritual phenomenon today, and I don't entirely attribute that just to higher consciousness and freer thinking. There's another factor at play here in why paranormal phenomena in general is more accepted than it was. A lot of the change that's taking about has come from science itself. This is probably one of the least publicized aspects of this change that's going on. In the late 19th century, scientists were commonly expressing the opinion that, well, we pretty much discovered everything there is to discover out there. They made the same mistake in the 100 years before that too. All we have to do now is just fill in a few little spots here and there, and we've got a complete picture of reality. Well, what was so funny about that was that 10 or 20 years later, even less, about 10 years later, that view was completely upended by quantum physics, an entirely new branch of physics that was developed, describing dimensions smaller than the atoms, what goes on down there among the subatomic particles. And the early quantum physicists were absolutely astonished at what they were finding about the nature of quantum reality, subatomic reality. Essentially, all of those subatomic particles down there don't behave like matter in the macrocosmic world where we live. Those little neutrons, protons, electrons, muons, and whatnot, they're not discrete little BBs down there that just exist whether we look at them or not. I mean, if I turn my back on the chair I'm sitting in right now, it's still going to be there. But that's not the way the quantum world works. If you turn your back on a proton, so to speak, it goes out of existence. Those little BBs down there, they need us to exist. And how they exist, their nature depends on how we look at them. A scientist, for example, can conduct an experiment on a photon, just a little bit of light, and if he conducts one type of experiment to look at it one way, it'll act like an energy wave. But if he conducts another type of experiment, looking at it a different way, it'll act like a little BB, like a little particle. It seems to depend on the scientist and his consciousness and his mode of observation to determine what that particle is going to be. This is shocking. In fact, Niels Bohr, one of the pioneers of quantum physics, says anyone who is not shocked by what quantum physics has to say about the world has not understood it. And the bottom line is, quantum physics suggests that the universe is like a building made of bricks, and each one of the bricks is ghostly. What does that say about the building? Because you and I conducting this interview, we're a colony of cells, which are maybe 100 trillion cells. Each cell has several 100,000 molecules, some of them with 1 million atoms in it, like a DNA molecule, all working together perfectly and exquisitely. And each one of those atoms, say that 1 million plus atoms in a DNA molecule, is made up of subatomic particles that are not there unless we look at them. They literally stop existing without our consciousness. And what does that say about us? Well, the mystics have said throughout the 5,000 years of human recorded history, they have said that the physical world essentially is an illusion, and that the intellectual, the mental, the spiritual world, ironically, is the reality. What goes on in our minds and in our imaginations is what's real. What's going on out there in the physical world is an illusion. In fact, the Hindus have called it Maya, a very popular name today, and it means the illusion out there. So to turn this all around and wrap it up, I think what I'm trying to say is that one of the reasons that our society is changing its mind is because the intellectual elite of our society is beginning to have second thoughts about this philosophy of materialism, which was so popular when I was young, that the physical is all there is, and that consciousness is really just a construct. It's just an outgrowth of the physical world. In other words, your consciousness and mine, in the old view, in the materialist view, is like electricity created by a battery. You destroy the battery and the electricity's gone. But in the metaphysical view, it's the consciousness that creates the physical reality. Consciousness creates the brain. It's the exact opposite. And so I don't think it's an accident that society is changing its mind. I think our intellectual elite have been changing their mind as a result of discoveries in science, and that's filtering down to the rest of us, and including the media.
Well, we are talking with John Ronner. His website is angelwatchingme.com. It's linked up on the front page of SpookySouthCoast.com if you want to check it out. And you can also jump in the chat room there if you have any questions. You can also call in 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. And you had mentioned, John, the idea of quantum physics playing a role in this. I also wonder, too, if, as there's a lot of talk about the Higgs boson particle, and there's a lot of talk about this being the God particle, and how, once we can discover this, we feel like we've mastered, the universe here, and maybe these angelic visits are kind of God's way of reminding us and saying, hey, wait, you guys don't know everything yet.
Oh no, I think there's a ghost in the machine. Yes, I think that they're not going to be able to. Well, in fact, quantum physics has shown that you can't just neatly deconstruct the universe as just a soulless machine that's out there, and that's the tension going on between the two camps, the materialists and slash skeptics, and those who believe in a spiritual universe. The big debate is, and always has been down through history, what kind of universe do we live in? Do we live in a soulless, dead, accidental, meaningless machine, which is the universe? That's what the existentialists believed after World War II. Or do we live in a living, conscious universe that acts more like an organism than a machine? And the quantum physics, in my opinion, has shifted the advantage to the believers as against the skeptics. I don't think. Now, by the way, I don't think that the existence of a spiritual world obviously has not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Because if we had gotten it to that level, there'd be no skeptics. But I do believe that there is what the lawyers call a preponderance of the evidence. There's more evidence on our side of the scale than on the other side of the scale, and that's why the debate continues, because it's not conclusive enough to silence the legions of skeptics, not yet. But I think we're heading in that direction.
Well, now we've talked quite a bit tonight about the concept of guardian angels, and you hear everybody say once in a while, oh, my guardian angel must have been watching over me. Do we all have a guardian angel? Is there somebody in heaven or in the other plane of existence that's always keeping an eye on us? Sorry, go ahead, Moniz.
Yeah, I was going to say my guardian angel is Don Quixote.
Don Quixote. Well, that's an interesting guardian angel there. Well, questing. Well, that's good. That's a good guardian angel to have. Somebody who has a goal and is idealistic and insists on pursuing it. I would say that here again we're back in the realm of opinion. The most common opinion in the Judeo-Christian tradition is that each of us gets a guardian angel at birth. That angel stays with us until death, at which time there's a separation. But I've talked to hundreds of people, I suppose, over the decades, and some people feel they have more than one guardian angel, and others have told me that they felt they've been watched over in shifts, where somebody showed up, watched them for a while, and then left. And
punch
the
clock,
up.
and then the next guy clocks
punch
in.
the clock. Exactly. Great, and hit the time card. So once again, we're just in the realm of opinion, but that's the most popular one.
Would that be a union gig?
Well, the good news is that in this theory, anyway, it doesn't make any difference whether you're Al Capone or Mother Teresa. You're gonna get a guardian angel, and I do think that my personal thought is that we are all watched over.
But if that's the case, then how come guardian angels save some people and not others? How come we say my guardian angel is looking out for me, and then obviously there's other instances where maybe they weren't?
That's right. David Booth was a Cincinnati office worker, and some years ago he began having an interesting problem. He would have a nightmare every single night of a plane taking off from an airport with an engine breaking off. The plane would flip upside down, invert itself, and then come crashing back down to earth into an orange fireball. And he would wake up in a sweat every night, crying. It was so disturbing. And after several nights of it, he called the FAA, and surprisingly, they took him seriously. They started interviewing him. Unfortunately, when visionaries are, by definition, I suppose, using the right side of their brain, which is the intuitive side, the visual side, it's not the side of the brain, the left side that documents the facts and the figures and counts and does all that. So he had a lot of imagery, but he didn't have identifying information like flight numbers or anything that was a part of all that. And he did know that it was he did know that it was a DC-10, and I think he was actually able to identify it as an American Airlines flight. But anyway, bottom line was they couldn't narrow it down enough, and American Airlines supposedly had hundreds of flights. He had on the 10th night he had his last nightmare. It never occurred again. The next morning, Lindsay Wagner was the actress known for her intuitive abilities, was at Chicago's O'Hare Airport about to board a flight. And she had an overpowering feeling not to get on that flight. And even though she had the boarding pass in her hand for herself, the boarding passes for herself and her mother, she just turned around and walked away, literally, from the gangway. And a few minutes later, that AADC-10 took off, and as it was ascending, an engine broke off, the plane flipped and came back down upside down and exploded into a fireball. And over 200 people, all of them on board, were killed. The question arises: why was Lindsay Wagner warned, you might say, and others not? Mm-hmm. You know, why do angels go on vacation? And this is a question that crops up continually and always, particularly whenever there's a great tragedy. There's no real answer to that question. People have been asking it for centuries, so it's unlikely I'm going to figure out a way to satisfyingly answer it tonight. But I do think that, first of all, in Lindsay Wagner's case, she's known for her intuition. I strongly suspect the signal goes out, and some people pick it up and some don't, and I'll go into that in just a moment. So that's one possibility, that the other side is trying to get through, and some people pick it up and some don't. A lot of things go. Secondly, a lot of things go wrong in our world all the time, and much of the mistakes are our own doing. I mean, for example, World War II broke out in the 1940s as a result of 2 decades in which literally millions of Europeans had turned to fascism, and things got to the point where 2 of the most warlike nations on earth started a Holocaust and a bloodbath that killed, hundreds of millions of people and did trillions of dollars worth of damage before it was all over. That was not God's fault. That was our fault. We did that. And we had to suffer the consequences of the mistakes that the human race made in the 20th century. So sometimes bad things happen simply because we make mistakes and we have the free will to do them. Mm-hmm. But none of this stuff is entirely satisfactory. I will mention one thing, going back to the first theory there about how the other side is trying to signal us, warn us, and whatnot. Maybe we pick up the signal, maybe we don't. A researcher by the name of W.E. Cox conducted a study of accidents, a statistical study of accidents, and he came to the conclusion as a result of his study that there is a drop-off, a statistically significant drop-off in ridership on trains, subways, whatnot, on days when an accident takes place. And he called this statistical phenomenon that kept cropping up in his study accident avoidance. It's almost as if some people, like Lindsay Wagner, actually get warned, but perhaps others just have a vague feeling, or something occurs that stops them from coming to the accident scene and being hurt. It's like the information may be picked up consciously, or it may even be picked up unconsciously. To give you an example of that, in the 1950s, the Westside Baptist Church at Beatrice, Nebraska, blew sky high one Wednesday night right around 7:30, which was slated to be the beginning of choir practice. And at that time, normally, you would have had anywhere from a dozen or more people gathered, in the church. But not a single one of them was there. Every single person showed up late that night, ranging from a few minutes to up to 25 to 30 minutes late. In fact, half an hour went by before they all realized that everybody was intact and unharmed. What happened? Well, it was just a series of coincidences. One person decided to watch the last part of a television program. Another one was finishing an important letter. Another one had a mechanical breakdown, and that made that individual unable to get there, and also delayed 2 others who that individual was going to pick up, and on it went. So what went on there? Was all of that just a coincidence, or was there a deeper spiritual reason for all of those to avoid it? Was that an example of what W.E. Cox called accident avoidance? So there won't be any satisfying explanation tonight, unfortunately.
Well, I think part of the call for angels and their existence comes from our need to feel like there's something watching over us. I mean, we don't want to think that we're out there alone in all of this. I mean, aside from the idea that we want to believe that we were intelligently designed and that there's more than what exists on this existence, and that there's more for us lying ahead. Part of it too is we don't want to feel like we're ever alone. We want to feel like not only is there a guiding hand to help us along, but they're doing so because there's a preordained destiny for us.
That's right. In fact, what you just described just now in the last minute or two was what they call existential angst. Existential angst, and the problem that the existentialists made that same complaint early in the middle part of the 20th century. They were trying to compensate for the fact that they believed they lived in a soulless, purposeless, accidental universe, and what they came up with, which to me is kind of small potatoes, is thin gruel, but they were doing the best they could given their philosophy. They were saying, well, there's no real meaning out there, and I don't agree with that at all. They're saying there's no real meaning out there, but at least we can make meaning for ourselves, which is true. If you were an existentialist, I suppose that would make sense. But I certainly, I would hate to think that I'm 61 years old, so I've seen a lot. I would hate to think that all of those decades that I spent on Earth, considering all of my ups and downs and trials and errors and strivings and triumphs and sufferings, that all of that is in vain, and all the information that's been stored up in my head about how to live a life has no purpose ultimately, and that when I breathe my last, it's all gone and over with. I would, that would be disturbing to me.
Well, we are talking with John Rodder. If you have any questions, give us a call, 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. And no, it's all right. They can still call in. We just we won't let them hang up, John. That's all. We'll be fine. We'll let them hang up on their own. But if you want to call in, please do so and share your thoughts, your questions, maybe your angelic experiences. John, I want to ask you, as somebody who's been collecting these reports for so many years, what is probably the most profound angel encounter that you've ever heard about?
Well, I would say that it's kind of interesting that you asked that question at this time. I thought of an armed terrorist taking over an elementary school in Cokeville, Wyoming in 1986, which I guess relates to the tragedy the country is grappling with right now. He filled a shopping cart full of explosives and rolled it in the school, took an entire school hostage there, and including the teachers, and wanted I think $2 million ransom per child, and wanted to have a private audience with Ronald Reagan, who was president at the time in the 80s. And there was a series of, shortly before the bomb accidentally went off, various children in different parts of the room reported seeing spiritual beings, ancestors, who appeared to them to warn them that a blast was coming and to move to different parts of the room to protect themselves. As it turned out, the bomb did go off, but because of a string of coincidences, it didn't have near the lethality or the deadliness that it was designed to have. And the only fatalities were, ironically, the bomber and his accomplice, that what could have been a huge tragedy was averted. And that was I thought that was interesting because of the fact that different children, different children not connected to one another, were having visions at the same time, and also directing those visions, directing them to safe spots in the room. So there's a lot of this. This ties into what we said earlier in the program about circumstantial evidence. You have a lot of that in this field. My friend Scott Degenhardt, for example, lost his father some years back when he was 17 or 18 years old, and they knew he was dying. But one night, Scott woke up in the middle of a sleep, and he saw his father standing above him on the bed in ghostly form, and he sat up in the bed, and as soon as he sat up, he looked around. He realized that he had sat up out of body, his physical body. He looked back, and he saw his physical body his head lying on the pillow with his eyes shut. And as he looked around the room, he realized his father had just died and was there for a final goodbye. And they began communicating telepathically, just essentially. At first, they began to have what you might call a telepathic conversation, but then eventually they just started dumping thoughts into each other's heads wholesale, without any conversational protocol similar to what we're having here right now. And eventually, the father had to go. Other beings appeared in the room, so on, and he left. But to make a longer story shorter, let me just say that right after the father disappeared, Scott found himself asleep. And the phone rang to wake him up. Was that a dream? We won't ever know for sure, but the phone call was from the hospital announcing that the father had just died a few moments ago. So the timing of all that seemed to suggest that Scott was having Scott had actually seen his father, and he had other experiences with his father since then. That's the kind of evidential story that I find interesting. In this case, that was a crisis apparition. I think that's what parapsychologists call it. And you also have deathbed visions, where people in the last moments, dying in the room itself, in the hospital room, will see departed loved ones appearing, or angels, some other spiritual figures appearing to escort them into the afterlife.
A friend
the
of
whole
ours.
category, yeah.
Are you familiar with the concept of electronic voice phenomena?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, but I think Scott Rogo, for example, wrote an entire book called Phone Calls from the Dead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I actually received one.
Oh, is that right?
My mother died September 3rd, 2001, and she died in the morning. And that afternoon, after I got back from the hospital, I was standing on the porch of my house, and a couple of friends had come over to express condolences. And my cell phone rang, and it didn't really show any ID, which I thought was strange to start with. And I answered the phone, and I heard her voice, and she used to call me by a specific nickname, and she basically said that she was all right. And then the phone call stopped, and you could have pushed me over.
I'm sure.
With a simple breeze when that happened. Now,
but how clear was it, the voice?
Extremely clear, and I know my mother's voice.
Yeah.
And a friend of ours, Mike Markowitz, is an EVP expert, and he goes into haunted locations with his recording devices and captures what he believes to be our spirit voices communicating with him. And on one of these clips, he caught what he believes, and I can't deny it, sounds like the gates of heaven.
Yeah.
Because it's a very angelic sound, and it's almost like a choir of angels, like you would expect to hear upon arriving at the gates of heaven. So there does seem to be a definite reach out from the angelic realm to us. And I've got to think, especially this time of year, as we get closer to the Christmas holiday, I mean, everybody, for the most part, they've either got a star or they've got an angel on top of their Christmas tree. And angels must be in the forefront of a lot of people's minds now. Do we have an increase in angelic visitations and encounters during this time of year?
I would say that you would expect that. I don't know if anybody's ever measured it statistically or done a poll to that effect, but the general principle is what you focus your consciousness on expands in your life, and what you withdraw it from contracts in your life. The medievals, for example, kept diaries called fiorettis of times in their lives when they felt an angel intervened. And, of course, when they started keeping the diary, they began noticing things more, and the angelic interventions became more frequent, and they actually started intensifying. You see this phenomena across the board. For example, if people who become interested in lucid dreaming will start keeping a log of their dreams, and, of course, it gets easier. The dreams become more vivid the more you pay attention to them. So yes, I would certainly expect, and around Christmas time, people are thinking about it, that it would be you would see a rise in angelic phenomena, and I think also there's probably more metaphysical phenomena today as a result of the increased belief. One of the things I think that goes on is like a self-screening. You know what? How can you have such huge numbers of people being believers and huge numbers being skeptics, calling in and insisting, well, I've never seen any of this. And in the early days when I used to do interviews, and I love it when the skeptics call, it's just wonderful because I like getting involved in a positive conversation with people of different opinions. But I would get calls from skeptics on the radio shows, and they say, John, I've never seen any of this stuff. And I don't doubt that, because I do think that there's a self-screening mechanism. If you think reality is a certain way, it's going to conform itself to your expectations. And whereas Lindsay Wagner might have gotten that tip, if you don't think that's possible, you might not.
Then again, you're also not going to catch any fish if you're throwing your line in a parking lot.
That's true, exactly. I hadn't looked at it like that, but a lot of it will depend on how you go about, not just if you're investigating, but where you investigate, right.
Well,
I was going to say, I cover a number of different subjects, and one of the things I've been researching for a number of years, at least over 25, is alien abductions and stuff dealing with aliens. Now, I get a lot of people that tell me that the experience that they have, they equate very much like encountering angels, that these beings are angel-like. What are your thoughts about angels and off-world intelligence?
Well, I think that from what little I've been able to gather about that, I think that you've got different opinions concerning what's going on there. You have like the hardware theory that there's actual extraterrestrial visitations. You've got the skeptics who say, well, there's nothing to it, which corresponds to the problem and the debate that goes on in the angel world. And then you've got the metaphysical theory that these are possibly supernatural experiences, and I don't know that you got the same situation there that you have in the realm of angels, where it's just not, and we don't know if it ever will be decided. So that's my take on that. I think there was an entire book written on angels and aliens, which I read many years ago, 10 or 15 years ago. It's an excellent reference for anybody interested in the subject, I would think. I've still got it on my shelf.
I'm familiar with the book. Yeah, it actually is very good. I just wanted to bring it up just to get your viewpoint on it.
Yeah. My thought is that there, the basic question, is there life elsewhere in the universe? In my opinion, the evolution of intelligent extraterrestrial life beyond Earth is inevitable. It's
a mathematical certainty if you follow the Drake equation.
That's what I would. In other words, you've got life has evolved steadily over the last 14 billion years. It's moved from physics to simple chemistry to more complicated organic chemistry, and the debate is, well, what happens next? Is it common for life to move on to evolve into biology? And I think we're getting to the point in scientific research where we're beginning to realize the inevitability of organic chemistry evolving into life. Now, it may be that life biology won't be as common, of course, as organic chemistry. We can see that in the physical universe. Right now, I'm reading a particular book on the Fermi paradox. If intelligent life is common in the universe, where is everybody? And a lot of different explanations for that. My pet explanation is that technical civilizations exactly like ours don't last very long. I'm not talking about us blowing ourselves up or anything. What I mean is that it's a very, very short window that we go through, because technology is advancing at such a breathless, unbelievable rate that within just a few decades, our planet is going to be completely transformed. And I don't think people realize how fast things are moving and what this planet, if we don't destroy ourselves, what this planet is going to look like in the middle of the 21st century, let alone the latter decades of the 21st century. Because remember, I don't know how you could quantify it, but some people have said we're picking up as much information and technology now in about a decade as was picked up in the whole 20th century, which was no slouch for technological advancement, and that this is compressing further and further as technology races ahead. So to get back to the Fermi paradox, I'm saying my theory is that I could see an extraterrestrial civilization, for example, going into virtual reality and just simply turning the lights out as far as the physical universe is concerned, or they're moving on to something else. So that may be one explanation for why we see such a void out there. But anyway, it's always fun to speculate.
Well, then again, you got people trying to say, well, why don't we hear anything from space and things like that? That's the equivalent of us today saying, we're looking for intelligence here on Earth by looking for smoke signals.
Exactly. It's funny you brought that up, because while you started that, I was thinking of cargo cultists expecting to hear tom-tom drums when there are radio waves going in the air around them all the time. And exactly, right now, even our own civilization is beginning to ramp down drastically the production of electromagnetic radiation as we move on to other things. So the problem we've got is that a human civilization on this planet a century from now is going to be unfathomable. 200 or 300 years from now, it would be like the difference between a dust mite in your carpet and you. Why don't we get in touch with the dust mites that are on our carpet? Well, we know they're there. They don't really have anything we're interested in. The science fiction movies notwithstanding, it's hard for me to imagine an advanced spacefaring civilization would be interested in mining the Earth, but maybe, I don't know. Who knows? But the problem is there's going to be such a gulf technologically between them and us so fast that it's hard to imagine that they may very well have interest in us if it's a civilization that's not too far ahead of us. But when you consider geological time spans, what are the odds that we would run into a civilization that's only 20 years ahead of us, or 30 or 100? Chances are we'd run into a civilization 500,000 years ahead of us, and then we'd be like a proton trying to talk to a physicist.
Well, the good thing is, though, is as we move forward to that, we will have these angelic beings watching over us and helping us along. So we want to thank you, John, for joining us. Again, John Ronner, his website is angelwatchingme.com, where you can purchase his books, and he has other books too, as well as his angel books. So check that out, angelwatchingme.com, and it's linked up on SpookySouthCoast.com as well. John, happy holidays to you and yours, and hopefully we can talk to you again in the future.
Same to you, and I appreciate y'all having me on. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
All right, that does it for this week's show. We'll be back next week with our big December 21st, 2012 post-game show. That's what we're going to call it. Because as long as the world doesn't end, and we'll look pretty foolish for booking the show if it does, we will have three different guests on. Well, nobody will be around to judge us. So we will have our big post-game show where we will analyze some of the theories that were out there and what we think that the real December 21st, 2012, what it really means. And so we'll be part of that big consciousness shift next Saturday night right here on WBSM, as well as on Spooky TV at SpookySouthCoast.com. So until then, for Matt Moniz, for Matt Costa, for Chris Balzano, I am Tim Weisberg, and we want you all to stay spooktacular and definitely hug your families a little bit closer this week for a variety of reasons.
All right, fine.
Rest assured, listener,
Cannonball!
that momentarily has not been
Find out
easy. The station that just heard was not fiction. Although, in many a desperate moment, I most certainly wish it had been. It's over for now, it seems. Or at least, until yesterday begins again. Tomorrow, 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 tomorrow.
Look, I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
The station that